One of the more destabilizing parts of recovery is realizing that understanding what happened does not always create the kind of relief you expected it would. Many survivors reach a point where they can finally see the relationship more clearly. The manipulation makes more sense. The patterns become easier to recognize. The confusion starts organizing into something more coherent. And yet, even after that clarity arrives, they often find themselves wondering, why do I still feel unsettled? Why doesn't this feel more complete? Why do I still feel pulled backwards sometimes even when I understand what happened? For many people, this creates a second layer of self-doubt because they assumed awareness would immediately produce stability. One of the most misunderstood parts of recovery is that recognition and stabilization are not the same process. That distinction matters because many survivors interpret the continued presence of emotional fluctuation, exhaustion, confusion, or internal instability as evidence that they are doing recovery incorrectly. But often, the system is still adjusting to what the mind has already understood. Most recovery messaging focuses heavily on insight. Understand the pattern, learn the terminology, recognize the manipulation, see the dynamics clearly. And insight does matter. It can restore orientation. It can explain experiences that previously felt impossible to name. It can reduce self-blame. But insight alone does not immediately reorganize the deeper adaptations that formed around instability. A system can intellectually understand the relationship long before it fully stops organizing around it. That is part of why recovery can feel slower, less linear, or more uneven than many people expect, especially after prolonged periods of contradiction, hypervigilance, self-interruption, or external referencing. Because those patterns did not remain purely intellectual. Over time, they started shaping perception, pacing, and internal expectation. And when people expect understanding to create immediate steadiness, the ongoing fluctuation afterward can begin feeling discouraging or confusing. This is also why recovery often feels quieter than people imagined. Not always dramatic, not always emotionally decisive, not always marked by one clear moment where everything suddenly feels resolved. Sometimes, recovery looks more like less internal urgency, slightly more steadiness, or longer periods where the system is no longer organized entirely around survival. Many important forms of stabilization are subtle before they become obvious. That can be difficult to recognize in a culture that often presents healing as intensity, breakthrough, certainty, or rapid transformation. But survivors who experienced prolonged destabilization are often rebuilding something much deeper than confidence alone. They are rebuilding internal continuity. And continuity usually stabilizes through repetition, pacing, and accumulated safety, not through emotional force. Recovery often begins looking different long before it begins feeling fully different. That is part of why patience becomes structurally important. Not as pressure to trust the process, but because stabilization usually develops gradually enough that the nervous system can safely hold it. As this process becomes clearer, recovery itself can start to feel less confusing. Not necessarily easier all at once, but less personally alarming. The continued presence of fluctuation does not automatically mean you are failing, and the absence of dramatic transformation does not automatically mean nothing is changing. Sometimes the system is stabilizing in ways that are still too gradual to feel fully convincing yet. If you're noticing that recovery feels slower, quieter, or less emotionally definitive than you expected, I created a 30-day stabilization space as something structured you can step into while you move through this period without needing to force progress or evaluate yourself constantly along the way. The link is in the description below whenever it feels appropriate to explore it. And if you prefer to stay here and continue orienting at your own pace, that is completely valid. Recovery does not become real only once it feels complete. Sometimes, stabilization is already happening before the system fully recognizes it. We'll pause here.